remain seated. Keep your safety belt fastened until the ride has made a complete stop.
What you've just heard is a very real memory for me.
Of
a trip to Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia, to ride the Loch Ness Monster, which at the time was the scariest roller coaster on the East Coast.
And what an appropriate name.
Yes.
For tonight's episode.
It's going to be a Scottish theme tonight.
But Scott, let me ask you this. What scared you about that?
Well, that roller coaster, when you stand below it and you look up at it, it is monumentally intimidating. It's 114 feet tall. There's a 60-mile-an-hour drop. It has 2 interlocking loops. It goes over the water. There's a reason it's called the Loch Ness Monster. It's very cool and frightening, bright yellow. And I just had always kind of been a little bit afraid of roller coasters in general, and my aunt thought it would be big fun to take me on that. And when she yelled that, we were in the front cars, and it wasn't just me that screamed when she said it. It was everybody on the roller coaster as we plunged at 60 miles an hour down the side of an 11-story building.
Fearing for life and limb.
Well, yes.
And speaking of limb, did you raise your hands?
I'm one of those people that's a little afraid. I'm afraid they're going to,
that just seems
get
foolish to me. You don't do that. You don't stick your arm out the window driving. You learn that as a kid.
Right.
Your dad tells you don't do that.
Yeah.
But you do a little bit of the flying bit.
Yes.
But she was not afraid.
No.
She saw an opportunity to amplify your fear in the name of fun.
Well, yeah, what she thinks is fun.
And whether they liked it or not, the rest of the people on the other cars behind you.
Yes.
And this is what we're getting at here. It's a controlled fear, right?
Yes.
Because roller coasters are safe.
Yes,
for the most part.
You can pretty much say you can assume that you're going to live through the ride.
Right. Even though you were not in control of that. You weren't steering the thing. You're not driving it.
Right.
However, we've made this other parallel. When you are driving, and you're a man who enjoys fast machines and thrilling experiences.
Yes. I'm not an adrenaline junkie, though.
No, you're not. Clear. No, you're very, I got to say, you're very rational. You're a very responsible person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I say. When I ride with you, and if we're in a, we don't go that fast, but if we're off-roading or something, I feel very safe because you've taken the time to study. You don't take chances where they're not necessary. So I feel perfectly safe. And in that environment, it's a lot of fun.
Right.
However, there are some instances where you maybe poke the fear bear and you're maybe tempting it a little bit. And would you consider Halloween to be something like that?
Well, Halloween has I think one of the great things about Halloween is, the psychologists all say that you have to confront your fears. And I think humanity confronts its fear of death through Halloween and through the rituals associated with Halloween all over the world, including Dia de los Muertos and, and whatever other iterations of it there are, which, and Dia de los Muertos is a great example of turning it around into something fun and going to the cemetery and celebrating your dead relatives and partying with them and playing music.
Lots of great, fun, and it's a family celebration, but it touches on something that I personally believe in, is that nobody really dies. They're there with you. You are.
Oh, you're putting that out there, huh?
Huh?
You're going to go ahead and put that out there.
What's that?
Yeah,
there's an airplane. I thought you were talking about the airplane flying overhead.
No. I'm talking about your belief system.
Not so much. I mean, personally, I don't think that's it. And then now people are drinking your tequila. I don't think that you're probably you're tasting that, but you're tasting that in spirit. And that's the idea. You're there with your family. There's your favorite foods are there. Everyone's having a good time. And I think I prefer, you know what? I don't know. Of course, I can't say what happens, but I prefer to believe that.
Right.
It should be a celebration of your life, not just mourning
I agree.
Your loss.
I couldn't agree more. Like New Orleans, like what they do in New Orleans is amazing.
At a great right. It's starting off. Plus, I love jazz. So it looks like it starts off somber, and then there's a call from the band leader, like, hey, let's celebrate this person's life. Let's have some fun. Listen to some good music and have some good food and just celebrate still being alive while keeping this person's memory alive as well.
And that said, as happy as you might be in all those moments and all the fun that you might have at a Dia de los Muertos party, there's still a few cemeteries that you might not want to go have a party at.
Well, you know what? Because that's the other side of it, is that It's a way station, then, to the other side, which we don't know about and can be a little bit scary.
A thin place.
Yes, very good. A thin place, as I think it's a Scots or an English saying.
Yeah.
A place that's close to the other side, where the veil is very thin. And they can be pretty scary, as we're about to find out. Now, are there any cemeteries that kind of scare you?
This is going to be the only one. Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
I wouldn't be surprised if this killed me. Spiritualist minister Colin Grant, after performing an exorcism at Greyfriars Kirkyard. He was dead 2 months later.
Tonight's show is about the root of fear and people's desire to look unflinchingly into the eyes of the things that scare them the most. Come with us to Greyfriars Kirkyard, Scotland. So there's a cemetery in Scotland that is world famous for a statue of a little dog known as Greyfriars Bobby. The cemetery is called Greyfriars Kirkyard. Kirkyard being, you explain this to me, this is the Scottish term for church.
Yeah, actually,
churchyard.
Exactly. It's an old Scots Gaelic word, kirk just meaning church. So when you hear us say Greyfriars Kirk, it's just Greyfriars Church or churchyard or kirkyard.
Okay, so Greyfriars Bobby was a little terrier that had a master who apparently worked at the church or in the churchyard or at the kirkyard, and unfortunately, the owner, who was a shepherd named John Grey,
come here, boy,
died when the dog was relatively young. And the story has it that the dog stayed at his grave for 14 years every day until it eventually died in 1872. Now, so this wasn't too long ago. This is more of a recent history. But this is the reason that a lot of tourists go there to see the statue of this little dog, which is the most photographed statue in Scotland, apparently. In Scotland.
It's one of the most, and he's a Skye Terrier, I believe.
Yes, right. That's right. A Skye Terrier.
But it's very
cute. We have pictures of him on our website.
The thing is that he looks like he's maybe guarding the churchyard, the graveyard.
Yes. And so, but the interesting thing about this is, according to a book which we sourced a lot of information for our show tonight, it's a book called The Ghost That Haunted Itself by author Jan Andrew Henderson. In this book, he says that John Grey, the shepherd, is actually buried a mile away. So the story isn't even really accurate, but nobody wants to hear that.
But Scott, it's an astonishing legend.
Yes, right. It's nice plug.
Yeah,
nice
that was
plug.
Terrible. But yeah, no, it's one of those things where the legend is much more favorable to the reality, and because you want to believe that the little dog there. And I think I read some of that story where he would go sit there in rain or shine and cold weather or good, and they started taking care of the dog, and they just kind of let him. He didn't have a license, and he didn't have a master, so he was kind of illegal, and so they would start taking care of him and feeding him.
And Disney made a movie about it, apparently.
Oh, did they?
At some point, yeah. I never saw it. I don't even know what it's called, but I did find that in some of our research that they had made a movie about it. So the story has it that John Grey, who was his master, is buried there, and there is a tombstone there for John Grey, but it's not really a tombstone. It's more of a monument, and it says this monument was donated by American lovers of Bobby or something like that.
Well, people love animals. They love animal stories, especially ones of loyalty. I believe there's a legend of a cat in Japan at the train station that his owner got on the train, left, and whatever happened, he never came back. But the cat showed up every day for 12 years.
That's so sad.
Well, I mean, I don't know. To a cat, what's time? He's just thinking it could be today. Could be today. Well, no.
So, Forrest, that little dog is not the only thing that Greyfriars Kirkyard is famous for. It has a pretty colorful past, right?
Oh, it's very rooted in Scottish history, and especially Scottish religious freedom.
What city is it in?
It's in the capital city of Edinburgh. And I'm thinking,
nicely done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you're American, you say Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And
we're going to try to pretend we didn't watch the YouTube video that tells you how to say.
Well,
Edinburgh.
just don't say Edinburgh. You're not giving it proper respect, probably. So here's a little rundown, just so you kind of get the history of it, and you can see where these characters are coming from. So essentially, the site where it was on was housed Franciscan monks, and they were that order is known as the Greyfriars. And I believe, the Dominican monks, they're known as the Black Friars. So you can kind of see that's where the name comes from.
Right. There was a friary. Is friary a word?
Yeah, exactly.
There was a friary there
right.
before the church.
Yes.
And also, if we haven't already said this, the Kirkyard is a cemetery, by the way.
Well, this is a little interesting thing. In the center of the old town of Edinburgh,
nicely done.
Edinburgh. Yeah. In the center of the old town, the main church, and I believe it's called the National Kirk of Scotland, the National Church, and that is St. Giles. And that's been there probably a few hundred years before that. Very old church, still standing. And so as with a lot of European tradition, as people passed away, you're buried in the churchyard. And there's usually, and even in little towns, there's a cemetery next to the church.
Right.
Well, as people started filling that up, it got overflowing. And so they started diverting the bodies going from St. Giles, and they needed a place. And the Greyfriars area, where they were formerly housing, where the friars were, that was dissolved, I think, in, 1561.
Okay.
So there was a town decree saying, like, let's
But
find
the church, wasn't the church already built by the time they did the decree?
Let's see.
I feel like it was. I mean, I don't know for sure. I know that it took 20 years to build the church, too.
Exactly. Well, the
classic sort of pillars of the earth style, actually.
Right. So the construction began in 1602. And was completed around 1620.
Okay.
But the actual plot of land was founded in 1561, and specifically to take these overflow burials.
Okay, so the burials were started before the church.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's had a long history of dead people being there.
Right, and it's a mound now, right? Because there's so many.
Probably.
I had read that there's up to 500,000 bodies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is quite a few.
I don't know how that works though, because the population in the mid 1600s in Edinburgh was only 35,000.
Well,
I mean, that number's probably wildly inaccurate, but I did read that. I can't cite the source.
No, I mean, that's the thing, is that a lot of people were interned there, and during that, really?
You always say interned. It's the intern is like Monica Lewinsky. Intern is when you're dead.
That's what I meant. You get an internship, unpaid.
Yeah, okay. There was.
I'm sorry. They were. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. I have to look it up. So many people over the years were interred there, and it started to overflow. But there was a decree from the town council saying...
The Edinburgh Council, which comes up all the time.
Right.
They're still there, I believe.
Yes, well, they're still... They have something to do with the trust of the
I mean, it's
of the
new
property.
guys, of course. So they would be...
No, they're not
300 years old.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, they're...
You've chosen poorly.
You need some modern thinking, but basically there was an official decree that, hey, let's start putting these folks outside of the town. So Greyfriars actually sits on the southern edge, I believe, of the old town part of Edinburgh.
It's not outside town now, but when then it was on the edge of town.
So that's the start of the building as a place of worship. Now, the church starts taking an important role in the history of Scottish religious independence when the National Covenant was signed there on the pulpit on February 28th, 1638.
Signed right there at the Kirkyard.
In the church. You know, it was an official ceremony.
Yeah, in the church.
And what that was is there were a lot of practicing Presbyterians, I think being an offshoot of Protestantism, and they were happy with that. They believed that was best for Scotland. Those are the teachings and the principles that they wanted to follow. At that time, there was no head of the Church of Scotland.
Right.
The Scottish Kirk. So what you did have in England, starting, I believe, the split came, Henry VIII split from the Roman Catholic Church, I think mostly because they wouldn't grant him an annulment from Catherine of Aragon, who he just desperately wanted a divorce from, and they were like, no way. And so he said, well, I'm going to start my own church then.
Right.
That's all that, that's England. So that's what's going on there. And really what it boils down to is this is a time of great tumult in Scotland and Europe in general, but the plague coming in 1645.
Yes, 300 years after it first showed up in Italy, now it's made its way to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
At certain times, as much as 50% of the population was infected.
Oh yeah, huge numbers, and in the port cities even more because they're taking in people from other
travelers.
Yes, they're stacking them high and deep, and it's taken its toll. And almost what do they say? Nearly a third of the population, I believe, of all of Europe perished.
Yes, it was so bad at one point in Edinburgh these doctors were coming around in these crazy masks. You have to look them up. We have a picture of it on our website. This mask has like a long beak on the front. They're still worn at masquerades now. Very frightening looking because they had these herbs tucked into the long noses because they believed that the smell of the herbs would prevent bad-smelling germs from giving you the plague. And these doctors would come by and they'd lance boils and do all kinds of horrible crap.
Yeah.
And then when they came out of the house that you were in, a lot of times, if they felt like you were too far gone, they would order the house bricked up.
Whether you were getting better or not.
Yeah.
Or, hey, better safe than sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, there was so much paranoia about the plague that you could just pass out drunk on the street and you'd find yourself in a coffin.
It was a bring out your dead kind of a thing.
They would scoop you up and put you in a coffin and bury you.
I'm getting better. No, you're not. You'll be stone dead in a moment.
But there was a plan for this. Inside the coffin was a little bell.
Oh, that's...
A little, and you would ring the bell.
Oh, no, don't put it off. No, help. Let me, please.
But the only problem is the bell was underground with you.
You know what? That sounds like a solution offered by people who don't really care if you're ringing the bell or not.
Yeah,
it's
I don't know what the point of that was.
It's better safe than sorry.
Well, over time, because so much death was happening at Greyfriars, a lot of coffins that were exhumed for one reason or another, whether they were moving things around or whatever, they did find bite marks and claw marks inside the coffins. Yeah. Can you imagine? Talk about a fear. That's a fear. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one, but, when being buried alive...
Yeah.
It's just like...
Well, no, and it's, it's been exploited in various films.
Well, yeah, sure, Kill Bill.
Kill Bill.
Unbelievable.
And then there's an Edgar Allan Poe movie with John Cusack.
Oh, yeah.
And the lovely Alice Eve, where she is buried alive. Oh. And, just for a while, but still, you can imagine. And imagine if you're claustrophobic.
No.
Like, what worse... You're either going to...
Body double.
Body double, yeah. You're either... That's a good one. You're either going to face your fears and get over it, like you will with a roller coaster, or, you're probably maybe not going to survive that.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that was happening is the body snatchers were coming because the university in Edinburgh had a medical school, and they needed bodies. And so the grave snatchers would go over to Greyfriars Kirk, and they had a special method of digging a hole behind the tombstone. They would go down vertically and open the coffin on the end.
Yeah.
And pull the body out. And then just fill the hole back up. And then from above, it wasn't clear that it had actually been exhumed, illegally exhumed.
It's pretty resourceful.
Yeah, they take it down there to the school and meet some, medical student.
I believe, eventually the Sydney passed an ordinance that don't just stop doing that. That was So what we're saying is that a time of great turmoil all throughout Europe, but especially in Scotland. And so then what you have is you have Charles I, King of England. He's got rule over Scotland, and he's got tendencies that kind of align more with Roman Catholicism. Plus, he was married to a Roman Catholic, so now the Scots are they're a little wary of him. And he wanted to have Scotland take a more Anglican approach to their worship.
He was the one that was introduced Episcopalian. Also, just sorry.
Appropriate.
Episcopalianism.
Yes, that is a mouthful.
He tried to introduce Episcopalianism.
Yes, and
as a gateway, they pretty much all felt it was a gateway to Catholicism.
Well, this is the thing.
It was a Trojan horse.
The Anglican Church, the Church of England, founded Henry VIII and all that, and he had established himself as the head of the church. It's very similar. Look, they didn't want to have to come up with a whole bunch of new stuff. It's like, we'll call it this, and we'll do our practices and our belief systems a little differently. And there's some things that they did not do. And again, that comes from Protestantism and Martin Luther.
Protest.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Scots were having none of it.
Right. So they said, hey, you know what? Let's, I'll tell you what. I mean, he's okay as a king. Let's come up with a national declaration that we will give to him, which is the National Covenant, and say, look, we're fine under your rule. You seem to be okay. We're cool with that. However, please don't try and force us to practice Anglicanism or those doctrines. We're happy with Presbyterianism. So that
so they signed that up.
They signed that up, and that was what happened in 1638.
Okay.
And there's a fun little other story that kind of because he was trying to sneak that in, thinking that it's so close that they probably won't even notice. So he had William Laud, the Archbishop of Canterbury, come up with basically a new prayer book, and some of the bishops in Scotland there come up with a new national prayer book. And we're just going to slide this in there, and you'll start doing this, and it'll be fun and fine, and you'll like it. Except at the first, and I believe this happened in St. Giles, the Dean of Edinburgh starts delivering this sermon, and this is the legend now, is that there was a shopkeeper woman, a street vendor, who was attending the service, and some think maybe she was planted there because look, at this time tensions were very high anyway. He starts delivering the sermon with these Anglican bents, and she gets so upset. She yells at him that he should get a colic in the stomach and hurls a stool at his head.
Disgusting!
Wow.
It's not proper church behavior usually, but what it did was it basically started a riot. People got really upset. They started yelling and screaming, bricks and stones.
It's like the Arab Spring with the street vendor. Couldn't get his permit.
Boy, when you start messing with people's beliefs and how they want to practice them, you're playing with fire.
It's always the street vendors. They're starting wars.
Those are people there on the street, and they're
say.
closer to the rocks and sticks, which were being hurled. So basically, this starts a mob, and eventually what it leads to is Charles the First is trying to put this down and battle these the people that are increasingly becoming militant.
Right. It's not just a mob. This is an ongoing movement.
No,
it's not
exactly.
a one night.
No, it didn't.
It's not
it
a
didn't
night
just,
of craziness.
Right. It didn't just pop up.
Yeah.
It was going. It
kept going.
It was
It
fomenting.
had legs.
Yes, exactly. It was fomenting for quite a while, and so these things basically just agitated enough people, and so now they're battling with the government forces,
and they're not very good fighters.
Well, there's not a lot of structure, so they win some skirmishes. But what happens basically, eventually it leads to the War of the Bishops, and I believe the War of the Three Kingdoms. So now you've dragged England, Scotland, and Ireland into all this mess. And eventually, Charles gets executed for high treason.
Right.
He's going up against Oliver Cromwell. It's really convoluted. It's fascinating, but it's very involved. So basically, what happens, now we come back to our folks here who are protesting, and generally they're called the Covenanters. And those are the folks who are
they signed their declaration. They wanted to stay Presbyterian.
Yes.
Charles is fine, but, this
and
is
most
what
of them
we're
were just
do.
Yeah, exactly. Most of them were just expressing their displeasure. However, there again, we said there were some that were militarized, and they came to a loss at the Battle of Bothwell Bridge, or Bothwell Brig, on June 22nd, 1679. So some time has passed, during which time lots of people being buried
at Greyfriars Kirkyard.
Generally from the plague, but from daily life as well.
Yeah,
everything.
The plague, daily life, and these battles.
Oh, I was going to ask you, did that change the landscape of the churchyard at all?
Yes, yeah, it's a good point. The church itself, even to this day, when you go and look at the kirkyard, you can see that the entire structure is on a mound, and it is quite literally a mound of bodies. And in the rain, when it rains, bones spring up out of the ground there.
Oh, boy. That's...
Well, that's not we're going to get to the meat of it here in a minute, but
so to speak.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's
words, I guess.
well, not for their show. This is
there's no meat left.
It's you're getting out of this, and too bad the dog wasn't around. I'm sure he would have had a
field
day.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So basically, they lose. Here's a little fun fact here. The Covenanters numbered about 3,000. The government forces about 15,000. And as Scott brought up, they were pretty unorganized. They're fighting between themselves. They lost about 600 men around that. And government troops, not so many. So they get taken prisoner and then marched 2 by 2, some 40 miles?
Yeah, about 40 miles.
Which is a long bike ride. But imagine with not great shoes.
Yeah, chained to somebody else.
Yeah, and they end up at
Greyfriars Kirkyard.
And so, in this area, what's it called? It's the
They named it the Covenanters Prison.
which is just an area adjacent
it was just
to the
outside
church.
the church with a big wall around it, no shelter of any kind, and it was also the winter. We were approaching the winter, I believe. Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. See, this battle takes place midsummer. By the time this all happens, they get back there. They're having to endure winter months in Scotland with relatively little shelter. Very poor food, very little of it.
I thought they came back. They put 1,200 in the Kirkyard. Were there 3,000 or 1,200?
No, I believe the folks that ended up at the graveyard there numbered around 1,200.
Okay, right.
And you know more about this. How they started? There was attrition.
Well,
they started
there was
dying off.
attrition. There were snipers posted. Anyone that tried to get out was shot. But there were, there definitely wasn't a perfect system. They were able. Some of them were able to bribe their way out.
Right. Yeah. If you knew somebody who lived in town, you were forbidden to speak with them, but they may be able to give you a little bit of money.
Get you some money or get you out. The same way things probably still work today.
What happened if you didn't were that lucky?
Well, you just. A lot of them just died right there in the field.
Yeah,
outside.
exposure.
When it rained, it snowed, whatever. There was nothing to even get underneath.
Right. And now I believe that you eventually could get your way out if you just swore an oath to the king and that you would, kind of dig whatever he's laying down there. And these people were so fervent in their beliefs. A lot of them just said, like, no way.
No.
And they
kill
just,
me.
Yeah,
or let me die.
Which happened.
Right, it did. And there was one man who was overseeing this operation. He was the King's Regent in Scotland.
Yeah, the Lord Advocate.
George Mckenzie.
Right. And what's his nickname, Scott?
Bloody George Mckenzie. And I'm not doing an accent. I can't do it.
He gets mad when I do one, so I won't do one here.
No, but
you have to be spot on. But tying into tonight's theme, he plays a very central role. And he's the high judge. And he's just following the letter of the law, according to...
Even though he's known as Bloody George Mckenzie, he wasn't like Vlad Dracul or anything. He was a very well-educated man who just a few years earlier had fought in court on behalf of Protestants.
Yeah.
And their rights. And he had also gone on record sometime earlier during some witch trials as saying... I think there's a lot less witches than everybody seems to think.
Yeah, very level-headed kind of guy.
I feel like most of these people that we decided were witches, it was because of the torture.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of person he was.
A little bit progressive, too. Just in his, trying to be fair.
Right.
On the other side of that, I think he was just a real stickler for, for the rules. So if it came down to it, either you were banished or executed. These are the rules, and I'm going to enforce them.
So ultimately, what happened was, these 1,200 people in the Kirkyard dwindled down to about 300.
Oof, yeah.
And then they decided they were going to take those 300 and put them on a ship and sell them into slavery. So they were put on this boat. They were chained up in the hold. The ship promptly went out and got caught in a storm and destroyed on a beach. And they were all chained up below, and almost all of them died.
Wow.
After spending all that time in the Kirkyard.
Yeah, that's your reward.
That's your reward. So, and we're talking about the 300 now that made it onto the ship. There were 1,200 in the Kirkyard. So that's 900 that have not made it out of the Kirkyard, aside from a few bribes here and there.
Right. Do you know how many survived the shipwreck?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like it was maybe 50 or 60 or something like that.
Wow. Yeah, a limited number. But that's the thing. So many people died. They actually called that the killing time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what he's kind of known for.
Right.
Now, why don't you tell me what happened to and he lived out his term and his life.
Yeah, George Bloody Mckenzie, eventually he died, and for reasons that I'm not entirely clear on, he was buried in a mausoleum in the Kirkyard inside the Covenanters prison.
Right, in that adjacent area. But you know what, to be fair, many famous Scots are buried there.
That's true.
So, yeah, if you were a person of a high rank or position, like he was, it's very likely that's where you would end up.
That's a good point.
And he has a nice little round, which
nice is not the word.
This is probably nice at the time.
This is where this where this episode's going to take a turn.
No, no. What happens there is not nice.
You cannot call something known as the Black Mausoleum nice.
I'm sure when it was built and was the paint's wet. Like, look, it's a nice little structure.
Everyone that I've ever read about that's seen it has called it ugly.
Okay, well now because
I'm just saying.
Yeah, well now the time is
bloody.
The time has passed, and lore and legend has built up.
Scottish kids used to go and stand outside the mausoleum and chant for Bloody Mckenzie to come out.
Oh, boy.
Bloody Mckenzie, come out if you dare. Lift the snake and draw the bar.
So that was a little bit of the history of Greyfriars Kirkyard. Now let's go up to the present day.
In the present day, a lot of scary things are still happening there. And that's what's fascinating about it. And that's why Forrest makes fun of me, but there's not a lot of things that I'm so terrified of that I wouldn't try to participate in them. Especially, it was the whole point of this show was that, eventually someday we would experience something that we couldn't explain. I'll just tell you right now, I'm not going to this place. And,
well, this is what's interesting about this place as a haunted site, as a tourist attraction, as a genuine historical site, is the frequency of these events.
And the documentation.
But also the severity. And look, again, we were talking about this earlier, but it's not people aren't getting killed, but they are getting scratched, and blood is being drawn.
Yes,
no gaping wounds, but definitely a bloody scrape.
Well, and in some cases, people are having issues related to what's happened to them there that have stuck with them for the rest of their lives to this day.
You're not just talking about nightmares.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right. The way this all got started was that in 1998, a homeless man broke into the Kirkyard seeking shelter from a really bad rainstorm. Now, I don't know why you would go to a place where people were left outside to die in the 1600s, but he probably didn't know that. Yeah. So
I think it's, look, when it's raining really hard and Scotland gets cold.
Yeah, it does.
So you want to get out of the rain
through your pants to the bone. So the guy broke into the Kirkyard. He then further broke into the Covenanters prison. And then of all the places he chose to try to get into, he picked Bloody George Mackenzie's mausoleum.
Right.
Otherwise known as the Black Mausoleum.
But it's one of the more prominent buildings.
Yeah, it is one of the and it probably looked like it was going to protect him from the elements. Yeah. So he goes up to it. It's got these two huge metal doors. You can see pictures of it on our website.
On the front, yeah.
Can't get in, it's locked up, but he notices when he looks through the cracks in the door that he can see a hole in the back. So he goes around, and the hole is a big enough hole in the wall that he can shimmy inside. So he goes inside, pulls his stuff through the hole, he's in there, and for whatever reason, he's exploring, he's trying to figure out, not that it's a huge room, because it's not that big, but he's looking around, and he's standing next to George Mackenzie's coffin, when the wooden grate that he's standing on, collapses, or who knows what, and he falls through a hole past the coffin into a pit underneath the coffin that is filled with bones, pieces and parts of multiple people.
Wow.
Now, whatever happened to him down there, we'll never really know. But he took off like a shot and got out of there.
Left his bag.
And departed the building. And we know this because a witness spotted him on the way
I believe the night watchman or the night caretaker saw him running out, panicked. And I think it's always been intimated that he didn't just see bones, which scared him so much.
Yeah, I mean, you're already breaking into a mausoleum and hanging out by a coffin.
Yeah. Right. What's a few more bones?
Yeah, what's a few more bones? But whatever happened, he left. And although there had always been rumors of ghosts in the cemetery, which there are in every good spooky cemetery, especially ones that are hundreds of years old, things after this event really took a turn. There was a lot of activity, and a local resident saw an opportunity to start a tour company and take people in there and probably make some pretty good money watching them get scared.
Well, sure. There's a lot of tourists that come through
Everyone's coming to see Greyfriars Bobby, right? Everybody wants to come see the puppy dogs.
It's adjacent to the old town, the old section of town.
Right.
As part of your, your visitation of the city, you got to hit that.
Yeah, you got to hit the tour. He opens a company called City of the Dead. Now,
right.
Come on, that's one of the best names ever. This guy is a marketing genius. He's right up there with Steve Jobs. His name is Jan Andrew Henderson, and he wrote an outstanding book, a really great read, which I would encourage all of our listeners to pick up a copy of after you hear this episode. If you
very
like this
comprehensive.
Story. Yes, the book is called The Ghost That Haunted Itself, and it's a fascinating story, fascinating book. Well researched and well documented. Prior to writing the book, he started this tour company. He's taking groups of, his plan is to take groups of people, 10 or 20 people, through into the Covenanters prison where all these events have been taking place. The problem is the Edinburgh Council won't let anyone in there. They've got it locked up. And they basically say to him, look, we appreciate that you want to do this, but we have liability to think about here. There is no question that there are issues in the Covenanters prison area, and you're not going in there unless you are insured all the way up to your eyeballs. So he does it. He proves that he's insured, and this goes to Forrest's point of view, which I think he mentioned in the Queen Mary episode about this is a business or someone with liability reacting to paranormal events on a business level.
Two business entities.
Yes.
Taking something that is, and not passing judgment whether it's real or not, but what they're saying is that this is happening enough, and we can see that this is happening, that we want assurances.
Right.
That people are protected, or they're at least, this tour is insured. Like the Queen Mary, not using a room that they could be making money on. It's a business consideration. Like, you know what? Enough weird stuff is happening here. We're going to take this seriously enough to
take
do
this
something.
room out of the loop. Yes,
exactly.
And that's the same thing the Edinburgh Council wanted to do. So J.A. Henderson got the insurance he needed, and he opened City of the Dead, and he started taking people through on tours. The culmination of the tour was Bloody George Mckenzie's mausoleum, otherwise known as the Black Mausoleum.
Yeah, it's the finale.
It is the finale. And because the belief is, amongst all the locals and pretty much everyone worldwide who's familiar with this story, is that his tomb was disturbed, and that is the reason these things have really gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
And he was the
catalyst?
Yeah, he was the overseer of the awful death of the Covenanters. And so he's the focus of this energy, and they feel like he's still, he's unsettled.
Right.
So, especially after this break-in where his bones were disturbed. So they finished the tour in the mausoleum. And it's like, great, this sounds like kind of a typical tour or whatever. We're all going to... But the only thing is, once you step inside that mausoleum, there are a wide variety of things that might happen. Now, the general feeling of the tour guides were, and there were multiple tour guides, they expanded to where they had 2 or 3 or 4, I don't even know how many at one point, but I read in his book there were lots of interviews with different folks. The tour guides would take people into the mausoleum because this is the place where the strangest stuff happened. Now, what was happening to folks when they went in there was that they were getting weak-kneed, feeling nauseous.
I don't feel so good.
People were passing out. Some people were passing out before they even got to the mausoleum, and there were several cases of people just being carried unconscious right out of the Covenanters prison before they even got to the Black Mausoleum and put in a car and taken away.
Yeah.
This happened to a lot of folks. Other folks got in there and became nauseous or weak-kneed, or their legs were frozen. There's the appearance of radical cold spots, which have been documented with paranormal investigations. There was a woman who had her hair pulled.
Want to get out of here now.
There were several women, there seems to be a lot of women involved actually, who had hands put over their mouths, or they felt a hand on their arm.
Feeling of suffocation.
Yes,
An actual constriction of airflow.
Yes. There's another woman who had a hand grab her ankle.
Got me!
And to this day, she says her ankle still feels cold.
Oh, boy.
And on top of that, when she goes to the beach or something, she gets a little sun. It does not tan there. There's a handprint around her ankle. All right, so this is not a joke. What's happening here now? What the other thing that's happening is the appearance of welts, gashes, cuts, claw marks on one guy's Adam's apple, claw marks on the back of the neck, people passing out, waking up with scratches on their arms, deep bruises like they've been punched.
Yeah.
and not even feeling when it's happening, and not feeling the scratches
That's the
either.
interesting thing. It's not like, you see an invisible person beating them up.
No.
They come out, and usually the person next to them says, hey, your neck's bleeding.
Yeah, and it's like there was another case where a woman was like, they're like, you have some scratches on the back of your neck, and she's like, really, where? And then they turn around, they look back, and it's like, no, they're going away. So anyway, that right there, already you can say, oh, well, people are nauseous because there's weird fumes in there. They're passing out because there's electromagnetic. There's some theories about electromagnetic energy.
Scientific theories.
Yes, and because the people that are being affected are not only believers, they're full-blown skeptics. There's, one of the guys who I think passed out before he even got to the mausoleum was someone who was like, I don't believe in this stuff, but he's like, I can't explain what happened to me. Right. And a lot of them, when they wake up, they describe a feeling that they said has stuck with them for the rest of their lives of coldness and fear.
I read one story in the book. This little girl comes out. She's 11 or 12, and her mom notices that she's got some bloody scratches on her neck or just towards her neck and shoulder.
I remember that one.
Oh my God, are you okay? What is that?
And that's the thing. It's not like she screamed out, ouch, stop that, and blamed somebody else in the tour. She didn't even know it happened until she came out.
That's right. That's a good point.
And
there's a lot of cases like that. They weren't associated with being unconscious. It's not just, that's right. Forrest makes a very good point right now, which I myself didn't even think about until this moment, but the scratches are not necessarily always associated with people who've passed out or fallen down.
I would say most, from the stories I've read, mostly not. And the people that have bruising is not from them falling down. I mean, people do pass out. And this will be a side thing. I was watching a YouTube documentary on it called Haunted Greyfriars, and it has an interview with one of the City of the Dead tour guides named Ian Robertson. And
is that the one with the super cheesy effects in it?
I believe so, but I found them entertaining.
Oh, come on. All right.
No, but they do interview
but the interviews are good.
Yeah, they interview some folks, and I applaud his efforts. It was I know there are a lot of work to do. But Ian Robertson said, as far as frequency goes, it could be a couple a month to a couple a week to 5 or 6 a day.
Right.
And that's when you start getting into, boy, there's something going on here.
This is considered, by the way, one of the most documented cases in the world of unexplained paranormal events. There are literally hundreds of witnesses and hundreds of photographs of the physical damage they suffered. As of 2012, there were over 450 documented attacks, with 180 of those people completely losing consciousness.
Wow.
180 people. Some people even suffered broken fingers.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about that. That's the thing that scares me the most.
Yeah.
You know what?
Who wants a broken bone?
Well, I'll take some scratches, sure, in the name of science and this podcast, and maybe a bruise or two, or even passing out. I have heard of people wetting themselves. I don't want that either, because it's just embarrassing. Now, if you want to get fringe, what is that's going on? I mean, yes, there might be. Now, I've certainly heard of that. High frequency vibration, low frequency, electromagnetic fields can all make people sick and can affect these feelings in people.
Oh, yes, and we should point out, by the way, in case before anyone else points it out to us, yes, we are aware that Edinburgh University has an AI lab, artificial intelligence lab, right on the other side of the wall from the Black Mausoleum.
Right. But this is the thing. So that accounts for some of it, in my opinion. But the hardcore skeptics are going to say, well, all that's also triggered. These feelings, of gloom and despair and oppressiveness and, constricted airways, all this is triggered as biochemical reactions to an outside force. And that even now there's theories, and you probably know more about this because I think you've read up on this, that seeing ghosts is actually just a biophysical response to outside stimuli, right?
Yeah, no, I haven't read anything about that.
I thought you. I thought you were. No, isn't that one of the?
Wait, I'm on the spot.
Yeah, isn't that one of those things that now one of the theories from debunkers is that even the act of seeing ghosts or anything kind of supernatural is basically just a physiological response.
I didn't know that.
That is triggered by something.
That's a plausible theory.
Well, it's what I look at it this way, and this just kind of occurred to me. It's like when people have a near-death experience, an NDE. and they see the white light. Well, neurologists can trigger that by
Yes,
stimulating
I have heard about this.
parts of the brain.
They have a thing, helmet. They call it the God helmet.
Right,
That
it can
simulates the white light
This is the
feeling,
thing.
right?
Okay, so this is the parallel. Is that yes, you can electrostimulate parts of the brain and cause this effect where you're seeing a bright white light down a tunnel, and you feel like you're traveling towards it. However, there's many people who have experienced this past that, where they have gone into the light and have talked to other beings and family members who have passed away, spiritual figures of all manner, and have come back. And I remember one where a famous case where a guy floated up. He was in a hospital bed, pronounced dead.
1506.
He claims he floated up to the ceiling and was reading the serial numbers off the smoke alarm in the room. And and he came back to life. And he told his doctors that, and they checked it, and it's like, well, he's got that right. So my point is, like, yes, I think some scientific phenomenon can explain part of it and maybe cause part of it. But there's another part, like I said, with the injuries and the scratching and the bruising and things coming and going, that the scientific explanation leaves me a little flat. Like, I don't think it covers it.
It doesn't cover everything. Even when you look at the electromagnetic, and I'm not trying, and by the way, I don't want us on this show to ever be accused of debunking plausible science.
We're trying to look at everything.
Right. We are trying to look at everything, but
we're not proposing any point of view. We're leaving that up to you.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we're a little biased.
You know what?
Of course.
I'm sorry. I take that
We wouldn't be doing the show. I mean, we wouldn't be doing the show.
You're absolutely right.
But still, I think that.
I'm telling you know what, we're telling you what we think, but we're not necessarily saying you have to think.
No,
that,
you don't have to think
right.
it. Yeah, we're not King Charles.
Yeah.
But so the point is that whatever's going on here, even the scientific explanations that have been put forward, which are incomplete at best, none of them account for physical injury,
right,
of the nature that's happening here.
Okay, and
the fact that this is so well documented and so direct, and in some cases for permanent for people who encounter it.
Yeah.
That all that tells me is that whatever is in there, it's not good. It's malevolent. Whether it's science or not, it's malevolent in terms of how it relates to humanity.
Right.
And I personally will never go there. I'm not going there.
Yeah.
No matter what I believe, and I've never seen a ghost, and yes, one of the things that we've said on this show, even in our small number of initial episodes, is that we both would like to experience something we could not explain.
In certain circumstances.
But you can take that one right off the list for me, because I'm not going.
Well, again, this goes back to what we said at the beginning of the show, is that fear can be fun and interesting.
On a roller coaster, yeah.
When under controllable circumstances. Okay, so now when you get to a spot where you're going to have something, a crazy experience, possibly.
This is crossing paths with something you can't understand.
Well, that's the thing. You don't understand it, and maybe you can't control it. The only thing you can do is not go there.
And typically, poltergeist has what they call a focus. You know this, right? It's a person that it's centered around, and you know a lot more about poltergeist than I do.
Some of the latest theories and study done on it suggests that it's not spiritual in nature. There's some kind of it's a psychic energy of sorts. And usually focused on somebody who's younger, usually a teenage girl a lot of the time is the focus. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, and it won't be directed. Things. I remember hearing this one story where a guy worked at like a Toys R Us, and he would go anytime that he was in the back of the stock room, stuff would fly off the shelves.
What was that? Get out of here!
Yeah.
And so once he left, it stopped. But this is a little different.
Yeah, this is very different. In this case, there is no focus because this thing can attack anyone that comes into the mausoleum, and in some cases is even near. Oh, by the way, in addition to all the stuff that's happening, the people on the tours, including the guides, are seeing some large white thing flittering about between the headstones and in the yard outside the mausoleum.
Wow.
But when you look at it, it's not there, but everyone is seeing it out of the corner of their eyes. In addition to this, groups, as they approach the mausoleum, hearing sounds, low growls, deep, dark laughter, growling, banging, And in the people within the same group, you could take like 10 people who are approaching the mausoleum. They all hear something, but then when you poll them, it turns out half of them heard one thing and the other half heard something completely different. Like one half would hear laughing.
Yeah.
The other half would hear growling.
Which is actually a common phenomenon.
Right.
With groups that experience paranormal activity.
And that which brings to bear the whole one of the long questions I've had for the longest time about all this stuff is like the things that you are perceiving, are they really happening, or is this something controlling your mind?
Is this something triggering each individual individually? Are they all experiencing their own thing, triggered by something that they're all externally experiencing?
Exactly.
But it's not just there. Don't the apartments, the flats, and the houses near
everything around Greyfriars Kirkyard, the flats, there was one flat where this woman had lived with her boyfriend, I believe. It might have been a husband, I can't remember. But and he was quite a skeptic. And she had a large collection of stuffed animals. And, I mean, this is such a classic thing. But and she had them in a corner on the floor in one of her bedrooms. And she and her boyfriend went out one night. They came back home. They go upstairs. They are all on her bed, stacked in a perfect pyramid. And it's just like, what is that? Who does that?
Yeah.
All right, let's say somebody broke it.
Toby Hooper.
Yeah.
In that great movie.
Yeah. What movie?
Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
No.
The kitchen chairs.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Poltergeist.
Exactly.
The movie. Yeah.
There you go, Poltergeist. But
that's not the only thing that happened to her. There's one other case where they went out, they came back home. All of her pictures on the first floor had been taken off the wall and stacked in a neat pile in the middle of her living room.
Yeah. Again, these are all seemingly typical types of ghostly activity that people report.
Additionally, J.A. Henderson's tour business headquarters and his home burnt to the ground.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
And the fire department could not find the source of the fire. So anyway, there's a culmination for this. And eventually what happens is a reporter and a spiritualist minister who we quoted at the beginning of the show decide that they're going to go and do an exorcism of the Kirkyard and specifically of Covenanters Prison. The minister's name was Colin Grant, and spiritualism is
he's an ordained minister, I believe.
Yes,
and but would perform these types of rituals and ceremonies, exorcisms and blessings and cleansings, things like that. And he would do this quite often. So he was, he'd experienced quite a bit of this. But I believe what I saw from articles that I'd read, that he was a little bit of an empath, and that he saw and felt a lot of what he claimed was going on at these places.
Right. And that was one of the things, and of course a lot of people might discount him and say, oh, empath, what is that? But the reality of the situation was when he went to conduct this exorcism, as he got to the Covenanters Prison gate, he stepped through. The reporter who was with him described him,
Susan Burrell,
who described him as becoming weak in the knees and having to sort of lean on the wall. And I think at one point actually have to come back out for a minute.
Yeah, he had to gather his strength and courage and thoughts and everything else.
And he went back in and was there for hours, walking around, performing a very, what appeared to be a very honest and sincere exorcism of the Kirkyard.
He's reading Bible passages. He's performing blessings.
Right.
Pretty straightforward.
Right. So at the last moment, he goes over to Mckenzie's mausoleum, the Black Mausoleum, and he goes up to it and he balks. He basically decides that he can't go in there.
Yeah, he'd been feeling increasingly apprehensive, I believe, and just really, the way that Susan described it, just not good about any of this.
Right.
Like just heavy, oppressive feeling, not feeling well, physically not feeling that well, very weak,
Right.
and didn't want to do it. But he mustered through it. Right?
Yeah, he did, except for the mausoleum. And when he came back out, he intimated that he felt like he had helped hundreds of trapped souls move on.
But
he said specifically, there is one larger entity here that I can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And he also said,
I'm afraid this may have killed me.
that was in November, I believe.
It was a year later. I think in 1999.
November of 1999.
Right.
January of 2000, he dropped dead of a heart attack.
Yeah.
67 years old.
Now,
to be fair, he had a heart condition.
Right.
He
And
was on medication
right.
for it. He was supposedly improving. He was conducting some sort of seance or something when he died. What were his last words?
With a woman who had...
We can paraphrase it. But...
who had hired him.
Yeah.
But basically was kind of giving her a reading. And I think and a little bit of, according to his wife, a little bit of sense of humor, he said...
I've not got any good news left, only bad news.
In a kind of a joking way.
Yeah, and then he dropped dead.
Yeah, but he was kind of like, I've exhausted this and myself. We're kind of done here.
Right.
And then he really was done there.
Yeah. So that's the story of Colin Grant. God rest his soul. But the main thing is, when you combine all this stuff together, the evidence, the photographic evidence, the hundreds of witnesses, Colin Grant's experience, the fact that something killed him
there's one
close.
photo that Susan Burrell took where there is a shape in the window behind him. And of course, who knows what that is? Could be a shadow, but we all like to believe it might be something. So but this gets into, now we're getting into...
And before we go on quickly, because I know we're about to segue, but like the last thing I want to say is it's important to note that not a single medium that has ever attended the Kirkyard has mentioned George Mckenzie by name.
Right.
Not one.
Well, this is what we get, goes back to what we were saying earlier with the history, is that he wasn't Torquemada. He's not torturing people. I mean, he's exacting brutal justice of the day, and he wasn't very lenient, but he didn't seem particularly evil or, cruel. I mean, the judgments that they handed down, yes, but he's following the letter of the law as put down by the king. So he just wasn't, he gave no measure of grace. He just kind of...
He wasn't a good guy. Towards the end.
No, well, that's the thing. You're passing down some brutal judgments, a lot of them including execution. So, not the most
executing people in the name of religious intolerance.
Right, following his job a little too well. But this is he wasn't a practicing devil worshiper and hell bent, shall we say, on doing bad things to people. But a lot of people didn't like his judgments, and he was hated. And, of course, he's attributed to the theme of the killing time. But this is the thing. I don't know that is the thing that's driving this.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, do you really believe that? I mean, you know how I feel. Do you?
How do you feel?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Before I get into that, the one other story that I want to share is about the birds. And there was one of the tour guides, I think it was David Pollock, I'm not positive, but with City of the Dead. And he had mentioned an experience with seeing this bird sitting outside the mausoleum in front of the door, just staring into the darkness. I guess the door was open. And it was there a long time, and he even went over to it and got real close to it, and it didn't fly away, and it was just staring into the mausoleum.
Not at him.
Nope.
Yeah.
Didn't even regard him, really. Mm-hmm. And... eventually, he left, and the bird was still there. And when he came back the next day, it was dead in front of the mausoleum.
Oh.
And there's more than a few cases of wildlife dying around the mausoleum or near the mausoleum or on the steps to the mausoleum.
Right.
And we have another story about birds. Birds come up in the paranormal world, in my opinion, based on just a few stories that we've been exposed to already. But I know Colin Grant had a heart condition, and, he was 67, which to me, in this day and age, isn't really that old.
Yeah.
But still, he died 2 months after he went there and said, I think that I may die from this.
Yeah.
And It's just, to me, I feel like sometimes if you have a brush with an entity like that, it's like the whole Harry Potter lightning bolt thing or whatever. It's
right.
like
It leaves a mark.
It leaves a mark. And it may be something, especially something that we don't understand, that might be with you forever. And in Colin Grant's case, it might have been the thing that did kill him 60 days later.
Right.
Or it might be something that shaves a few years off your life and you just don't even know it.
Right.
I don't know. All I know is that if I'm not over there, I don't run any risk of intersecting that issue.
Well, again, it goes back to our
Are you
earlier-
going?
I
wanna
would.
go?
I would.
We don't have any money or time right now,
No.
but if we did, would you go
Oh, yeah.
into the Black Mausoleum?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But this is...
I wouldn't even go into the Covenanters prison. I will come and look at that dog statue. Greyfriars
Hey,
Bobby,
maybe
fine.
that's enough.
Yeah.
People just around there experience things.
Okay, but you're right. I'm not going to that.
But no, that's I have some Scottish heritage. I would love to visit the
So do I.
the beautiful country
My
of
people came
Scotland.
down through the Orkneys.
And I love history, as you probably would have guessed earlier from the show. But this is the thing. It's not that I discount any of that. It's just for me, it's a little bit of like law of averages, and that I don't think that nothing ever exciting ever happens to me. I'm saying, like, I would go there and like, you're the guy that, you're the 80% that nothing happened to. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of the idea. Now, we were discussing this quite a bit leading up to the show, and even just a few minutes ago, that it's the roller coaster. It's a controllable circumstance. It's you driving a sports car. These are things that are somewhat controllable, and not that I think that I can control the underworld, but I don't feel. I guess I just don't feel like something would happen to me, and that I would be bringing it back. But this is what I'm getting at. It's like, yes, it would be interesting to see something.
You know what you sound like right now.
What?
It reminds me. I've lived all over the country, but I did back and forth a few times, but I did happen to live in Los Angeles when the Northridge earthquake happened.
Right.
And I remember Kevin and Bean, who are some local radio DJs, coming on the next morning, the morning after the Northridge quake, and making a joke. And it's like, it reminds me of what you just said, where they said, they say when the big one comes, I don't know, 50, 100,000 people are going to die, but, somehow I feel like I'm going to be okay.
Well, yes, but you know what? I fully believe... This is the thing. I fully believe in the phenomenon. I don't think it can't happen to me because it's not real.
But you just said, I feel like I'll be okay. You literally said, I feel like I'll be okay.
Yes, of course. But that's just, what I'm saying? That's just law of averages, in that, again, nothing, I don't win any contests. These things don't, what I'm saying? Like, I'd be the one guy. That's just, I don't have a feeling of dread. It's not like something in the back of my mind that's like, don't go there. Don't walk into that room.
I'm just the one. You know what the tour guide said?
Yeah.
They said
you're going to be
singled
singled out. You're going to be singled out.
Pick the one person out.
Because you were kind of skeptical.
They said, don't panic.
Right.
Because if you see it attacking someone else, you're safe. That's what they would say.
Yeah, and this is what I've said this before, is as far as like the idea of death does not scare me. I don't want to die. I don't want it cut short. I want as much as I can get. But the theory of it, the idea behind it, does not scare me, and the idea of ghosts and spirits and demons, I believe is, if we're talking about personal belief, I believe that is those things are a part of life. Now, as far as Greyfriars and demons and evil spirits and things of that nature, no, I don't want to provoke. I don't want to provoke that.
I don't think it's human. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, it's about time.
We hope you enjoyed the show. Come back in 2 weeks when we'll have an episode on the discovery and confirmation of Amelia Earhart's last known location. I want to thank Judson Crane for our amazing theme music, Ryan McCullough for world-class sound design, and Jim Creative Design.
But most importantly, we want to thank our listeners. You can find us online at astonishinglegends.com, on Facebook at the Astonishing Legends Podcast, and also on Twitter.
Copyright Scott Philbrook
and Forrest Burgess. Good night.